On February 13, 1967, Captain Zinoviev, piloting the latest version of the MiG-21, landed steadily on the runway, and as the fighter's speed decreased, he felt more and more out of place. This was supposed to be the GDR's airfield in East Berlin, so why was it surrounded by fighters painted in the tricolor markings of the French Air Force? Was this a visit from NATO fighters, or had East Berlin fallen? A series of thoughts raced through the head of the Soviet pilot, who had a head full of black lines. But they were neither of those. But rather the dude had strung out on the wrong side of the fence in a new airplane that had just left the factory. But don't look, at this time the protagonist is the MiG-21 and feel uninspired. This is the MiG-21's latest model PFM. In addition to the replacement of the new ejection seat and stronger radar, comes with the latest features at the time. Flap blowing system. This system can put the jet engine pressurized part of the airflow, through the pipe from the upper surface of the flap discharge. These high-speed airflow can improve the airflow speed of the upper surface of the flap to the upper surface of the attached surface layer to increase energy. At the same time, it can also delay to postpone the separation of the boundary layer airflow, thus improving the maximum lift coefficient and shortening the distance of the airplane takeoff and landing taxi. The MiG-21 PFM equipped with a flap blowing system has dramatically improved takeoff and landing performance, with landing speeds reduced to 240 km per hour from the previous 270 km per hour. Enhanced field takeoff and landing capability of the MiG-21 PFM. On February 12, 1967, Captain Zinoviev led 3 pilots to Lukovici, the MiG Design Bureau's test airfield, this time on a delivery, with orders to escort 4 brand new MiG-21 PFMs to their Air Force brethren stationed at the GDR's Cottbus airfield. The leader, called Zinoviev, is not a good person. In 1964, when the Soviet Army in East Germany's Magdeburg large-scale military exercises, a US RB-66 reconnaissance aircraft hard to break into the exercise area. Zinoviev piloted MiG-19 to intercept. The results of the enemy not only did not surrender, but also ignored him. Bad-tempered Zinoviev, a meal of rockets served. RB-66 should be the sound of the ground, the old quarter of the fame for a time. But what no one could have imagined was that just 3 years later, his actions on this day would catapult his big name out of the Soviet Union and into the world, far surpassing the heat he had previously gained by shooting down the RB-66 reconnaissance plane. As planned, the flight formation departed from Lukovici and flew to Minsk for refueling and reconditioning before flying directly to Cottbus, East Germany, the next day. The first half of the journey went smoothly. Early the next morning, the 4 pilots ate and drank enough. Piloting the brand new fighters rushed into the sky, the gears of destiny began to turn. No one would have thought that the next thing, they flew to the den of tigers and wolves. If they financed these precious airplanes to the enemy, even if they had a few heads, it would not be enough to cut them off. In fact, Zinoviev was not a stranger to East Germany. He and his young partner were attached to the 16th Kintetsu Fighter Aviation Division of the Soviet Union's Army Group, GSFG, in Germany, and often flew missions over East Germany. However, he usually flew to the Templin Air Base in Brandenburg, north of Berlin, and was not familiar with the Cottbus Air Base, 100 kilometers southeast of Berlin, which he had never visited. The fellows were still in a daze from having gotten up too early in the morning, and the clouds were too thick at the time, which caused Zinoviev and 3 of his brothers to get lost while they were over Berlin between Templin and Cottbus. Berlin at that time, the wall had not yet collapsed, although located in the territory of East Germany, but divided into 2. The west is the West Berlin by the British, American and French occupation area merged. The east is the Soviet occupation area of East Berlin. In the middle of the Berlin Wall stood, become one of the symbols of the Cold War. When Stalin wanted to rely on his armored flood, a breath of push down, in June 1948, the Soviet Union deployed armored forces, a comprehensive blockade of the entire Berlin, want to force the West to withdraw, but the US military air power is too strong, and froze by air to maintain half of the residents of the city of Berlin to eat, drink and shit. Become a major spectacle, tough as a father, can only reluctantly concede the defeat. About this Berlin airlift story we will talk separately later. Captain Zinoviev hovered over what they thought was Cottbus, completely oblivious to the fact that it was actually Berlin below. Far ahead, an airfield caught Zinoviev's eye, and with several small rivers meandering around it, Zinoviev ordered his men to follow him, and flew off toward the airfield. But he forgot that the Cottbus airport on the map should be miles without a river. Captain Zinoviev shivered as the cold February wind blew in through the cracks in the cockpit cover. Calls were made to the tower for a landing, but there was no answer on the radio. Captain Zinoviev thought to himself, I'm the one who shot down the American airplane. I don't believe that I can't land the plane without the help of your tower, and then he landed at the airport. He let 3 wingmen wait in the air first. If they stop together to upset the leadership, consequences are unimaginable. So the face of punishment, things all by him alone to bear it. And it was this righteous impromptu decision that turned out to be the key to Zinoviev's salvation. The runway in front of him was long and smooth, and Zinoviev flew the fighter into a textbook low-speed landing. The plane slowed down and began to taxi slowly down the runway. Zinoviev continued to call to the tower, but at the same time saw a sight that sent chills down his spine. There were many airplanes parked alongside the runway, but the models were NATO fighters that Zinoviev had only seen in manuals before, with French Air Force and US Air Force logos sprayed on them, and there was no Soviet flavor in the appearance of the service vehicles around them. Many people in French Air Force uniforms ran this way, their expressions of confusion completely unaware of what was happening. Unlike the older models before it, this new MiG-21 had a large intake nose cone, while the airspeed tubes were mounted above the air intakes, giving away its PFM status at first glance. And while NATO wasn't interested in the PFM's engines and onboard radar, the thought of an enemy identification system on it and the Soviet Union's newly lit flap-blowing skills was very exciting for all. Now a new MiG-21, intact and fresh from the factory, fell from the sky, and for a moment everyone present was happily confused. Without waiting to be rushed, a fire truck rushed onto the runway ahead with several service vehicles first, crossing in front of it to block the MiG's path. Zinoviev reacted at once to the fact that the men who had run over to me had either taken me for lost or for defectors. His brain was racing. The runway in front of him had been blocked, so he could only turn back and try his luck. When it was too late, Zinoviev stomped on the rudder, froze in the narrow runway to make a 180-degree in-situ turn, and then pushed the throttle to the bottom. The runway in front of the distance is not rich, but the pilot has pulled a big grudge with the NATO before. There is no way back. The MiG-21's engine roared to maximum power, leaving all behind, the huge area of flaps drooping downward, accompanied by the whistling airflow from above. The MiG-21 PFM didn't glide for long before it took off into the air, leaving behind only the shocked French officers, confused in the wind. Happiness, although it came too suddenly, but the departure of the same also caught off guard, just a few minutes, like a dream. After lifting off, Zinoviev took a long breath and tried to tell his wingman in a calm tone, "I've been on the ground, and although this place is very hospitable, it's not our destination, so let's keep looking for another one." Good thing nothing else went wrong next. Everyone found the real coppers and got the plane to the place without any problems. Old G's division commander, after knowing his exciting journey, cursed him for being an idiot. But after all, he was also his favorite general, and could only say with love and hate, to be able to successfully escape shows that you kid is really a talent. In the end, Zinoviev was not punished in any way, and rightly so, from the point of view of the Soviet army. Such things as flying to the wrong airfield and then leaving, as long as one does not admit to it, and say that I specifically just went to flirt with you guys, so what can I do?